Love under the Christmas tree. Why FREENBECKY matters. When Christmas strips everything down to what is true, Christmas has a way of removing the noise from things. During most of the year, people tolerate relationships that feel chaotic, confusing, or performative. There is less time to sit with emotions, less space to question whether something truly feels right. But Christmas pauses the world just enough for people to notice what they've been ignoring. It is the season of reflection. And reflection is where FREENBECKY quietly found their place. For many fans, the holidays made one thing suddenly clear. This connection felt different because it felt real. Not perfect, not dramatic, just real. The kind of love Christmas makes people ache for. Christmas is not only about joy. It is also about longing. It magnifies the absence of safety, understanding, emotional consistency. That's why people are drawn to love stories during this time. Not the flashy ones, but the ones that promise rest. FREENBECKY did not offer fantasy. They offered relief. Watching them didn't spark adrenaline, soften something. And for people carrying emotional weight into the holidays, that softness mattered more than excitement ever could. Why Under the Christmas Tree is more than a metaphor. The Christmas tree is not just decoration. It symbolizes continuity. It stands there quietly as people come and go. Years change. A life rearranges itself. Love placed under it is not impulsive love. It is love meant to return. That is how fans experienced FREENBECKY. Not as a fleeting seasonal moment, but as something that could exist year after year, steady and unchanged at its core. The kind of love that doesn't need constant renewal because it is already rooted. The absence of performance as a form of honesty. What people noticed most was what wasn't happening. There was no exaggerated affection, no forced closeness, no performative intimacy meant to satisfy an audience. Instead, there was a natural distance when needed, a natural closeness when desired, emotional awareness without control. This balance is rare, and it is deeply comforting. During Christmas, a time when people are exhausted by expectations, that lack of performance felt like permission to breathe. Love that doesn't make you nervous. One of the most telling reactions from fans was this. Watching them doesn't make me anxious. That might sound simple, but it's profound. Many love stories, especially in media, are built on tension, on will-they-won't-they dynamics, on emotional instability. FREENBECKY offered something else. Emotional regulation. They didn't spike emotions. They settled them. And for people who associate Christmas with emotional overload, that regulation felt like safety. Why queer fans felt this story in their bones. For LGBTQ+ fans, love is often framed as something that must be justified. Justified to family. Justified to society. Justified to tradition. Christmas can intensify that pressure. Seeing two women exist together without explanation, apology, defensiveness, was quietly radical. Not because it was labeled as queer representation, but because it didn't feel fragile, felt allowed. And for many queer fans, that sense of allowance, especially during a season tied to family norms, was deeply healing. The marriage feeling without the ceremony. Fans didn't call it marriage energy casually. They meant something specific. Marriage at its healthiest looks like a mutual consideration, emotional steadiness, a shared responsibility for comfort, protection without possession. That is what people recognized in FREENBECKY. Not ownership, not dependency, but chosen presence. Christmas amplified that recognition because the season itself is associated with long-term bonds, traditions, and people who stay. Why this story didn't need a climax. Most stories rely on a peak moment. Confession, reveal, turning point. This one didn't. Its power came from continuity, from watching the same gentleness exist across time, from seeing no sudden shifts in behavior, from recognizing patterns instead of moments. That's why people trusted it. Because it didn't rely on surprise. It relied on consistency. The internet's rare moment of softness. The internet is rarely patient, demands answers, pushes for clarity, thrives on extremes. Yet around FREENBECKY during Christmas, something unusual happened. People slowed down. They stopped interrogating. They stopped speculating aggressively. They stopped demanding definitions. Instead, they shared feelings. And that shift tells us something important. People didn't want information, they wanted comfort. Why this love story felt safe for strangers? There is a reason fans often say, "This feels like a place I can rest." Safety in love stories isn't about certainty. It's about emotional tone. FREENBECKY never felt volatile, never felt manipulative, never felt staged. That predictability, the good kind, allowed people to trust what they were seeing. And trust is the foundation of both love and meaningful storytelling. Christmas as a mirror, not a decoration. Christmas didn't decorate this connection. It reflected it. The warmth people associate with the season simply highlighted what was already there. Patience, gentleness, emotional presence. That's why the story didn't disappear when the season ended. Because it wasn't seasonal at all. Why people still return to this story? People don't return to stories that excite them briefly. They return to stories that regulate them emotionally. This one did. It became something fans revisited when the world felt loud. Relationships felt confusing. Love felt exhausting. It reminded them that connection doesn't have to hurt to be real. Love that doesn't ask you to prove yourself. Another reason this story resonated is because it didn't create hierarchy. No one was chasing. No one was withdrawing. No one was performing for power. The balance felt mutual. And mutuality is rare enough to feel revolutionary. What this story quietly challenged. Without saying anything explicitly, FREENBECKY challenged the idea that a love must be dramatic. Queerness must be explained. Intimacy must be public to be valid. They showed that love could exist quietly and still matter deeply, especially during a season that asks people to gather, to reflect, and to choose what they carry forward. A Christmas story about staying. At its heart, this is not a story about romance. It's a story about staying. Staying present, staying gentle, staying emotionally available. Those are the qualities people want most during Christmas, and perhaps all year. Why FREENBECKY matters beyond the holidays. This story didn't end with Christmas. Because its lesson wasn't seasonal. Taught people that love can be calm instead of chaotic, quiet instead of loud, a mutual instead of performative. And once people feel that kind of love, even secondhand, they don't forget it. Closing thought. The gift that wasn't wrapped. Under the Christmas tree, people expect gifts they can open. FREENBECKY offered something else. Feeling. Sense of safety. A model of gentleness. A reminder that love doesn't need to prove itself to exist. That is why this story stayed. That is why it mattered. And that is why people still return to it, long after the lights came down.